Hey guys, hope everyone's doing great out there. We're going to continue our World War II Axis victories PowerPoint. We talked in the last videos about the Nazis taking control of France and allowing the British to escape back into Britain at Dunkirk, attacking the Royal Air Force and bombing England and London. Um, and the Battle of Britain, and then how they took over North Africa to control the oil and trade routes and things like that. Um, Now, Hitler does that. He's kind of in a stalemate. He doesn't really focus on, he was focusing on taking over Great Britain, but since that was going slowly, he decides to turn. He wants more of a mobile war. He'd always hated the Russians, so he really looked into going in and taking over Russia and gaining more territory for Germany. The Soviets, the Soviet Russians, and Germany had this pact, this non-aggressive pact that they had signed. They agreed to split up and take Poland at the beginning of the war. The Soviets didn't think that the Nazis were going to attack them at all, so they weren't ready for it. In 19 the end of 1941, Hitler decides to attack the Soviet Union in what was known as Operation Barbarossa. First off, he goes into Yugoslavia and Greece. In June of 1941, launches a surprise attack on the Soviet Union from there to gain resources, living spaces, and finally crush communism. Operation Barbarossa was supposed to go in, use the Blitzkrieg strike, and quickly take over the Soviet Union. But it doesn't work like it did in the other areas because the Soviets do like they did against Napoleon and the scorched earth. Instead of sitting there and actually fighting against the Nazis, the Russians, or the Soviets, they pulled back, they burnt their resources and things like that, and spread the Nazis thin. Catching the USSR unprepared, the Nazis quickly captured vast amounts of land and charged towards the cities of Moscow, Leningrad, and Stalingrad. But like I say, the Soviets are just kind of running away and sucking the Nazis in. And then the winter hits and it really bogs them down. You can kind of look through there and look at the pictures of them attacking the Soviet Union. Um, and then you can see the map where all the areas that the Axis controlled in Europe by 1943, 42, I guess. We'll get into Hitler getting stalled down in Stalingrad and that being the turning point of the war on our next PowerPoint. Today, the rest of this, we're going to move on to Japan. Japan at war. To halt Japanese aggression in Asia, the U.S. applied economic sanctions. Because the U.S. stood in their way, on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese launched a sneak attack upon the American naval base at Pearl Harbor and also attacked British colonies. The United States was trying to remain neutral during this time, but the Japanese realized it was only going to be a matter of time before we got involved, so they decided to use a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor to try to cripple us. They thought that if they destroyed our Pacific fleet, that we would just kind of cower down and not come back. But like I've said before, they kind of awoke the sleeping giant. They didn't realize how quickly we would mobilize to come back and seek revenge. Germany and Italy had declared war on the U.S. after December the 7th, 1941, and Pearl Harbor. By the spring of 1942, Japan controlled much of Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific. Japan expected the U.S. to surrender, but instead, we joined the Allies to fight against the Axis powers. At first, when we start attacking the Japanese will defeat us in the Pacific. That goes along with the Axis victories. They take over the U.S. Philippine Islands. They captured a lot of soldiers there. They forced them to go on this horrible march called the Bataan Death March, where they pretty much made people walk hundreds of miles, didn't give them any food or water. If they were too weak to continue, they just bayoneted them to death. And then once they got to the prison camp, they tortured them there, so forth. So they did a lot of bad things. We will come back and try to liberate that, and we have that in the back of our minds when we are attacking the Japanese territories that they'd taken over and so forth. And that'll be it. As I said, this is kind of the first part. The Japanese are able to take over almost all of Southeast Asia. They surprise attack us at Pearl Harbor, but we will quickly mobilize. We turn all of our sources of production into a war-making machine. We draft thousands of soldiers into the army. Thousands of people volunteer, and we will set forth in taking back Southeast Asia and then defeating the Nazi and Italian empires in Europe. And we will get into that in our next PowerPoint in the Allied victories. I hope everybody's doing great out there. I will do the video of the Allied victories, the first one probably tomorrow, and into Monday. We will have the Allied victories and the Holocaust PowerPoints to talk about from here. So I hope everybody's doing great. Have a great weekend and be safe. Talk to y'all later.